Have you ever had one of those days when nothing seems to go right? I should have realized that today was one of those days when I got a call to go out to the south of town to unlock a house. I've always disliked that part of town. It's full of rich snobs who think that the sun shines on their backs 24 hours. Most of them act like they know everything, so I just knew this was going to be a real hassle of a job. As I rolled up in front of the white McMansion and saw the lady of the house in a terry cloth robe and not much else, I sighed loudly. Yep, this was going to be an absolute nightmare for sure. I stepped out of my truck and grabbed my basic pick and bump key set, hoping against hope that this was not going to be a high-security setup like a multi-lock or Medico. Finally, you're here! I told them I needed someone fast and you took over half an hour. Thank goodness I wasn't dying or anything. I passed a smile on my face, even though I wanted to turn around, get back in my truck and leave. My client, who was doing her very best to impersonate a screech owl, was a fair representation of what I had come to expect of this neighborhood. I would guesstimate the late 30s, had some body work done, definitely too much primping of the face, and she was your basic trophy wife to some 60-year-olds I would hazard to guess. Sorry, ma'am. Got here as quick as I could. Is it the front door you are having issues with? She loudly let me know that it was, so I hurried over to it. Naturally, it was a high-security lock, an angle, which is basically a Chinese knockoff of the multi-lock brand. I silently cursed to myself, knowing that it was going to take at least 10 or more minutes to pick. I sent a short prayer to God and Sonny Jesus that it would go fast and that she would be quiet while I worked. Naturally, they both decided I needed a taste of hell and brimstone. Over the next 20 minutes, I heard a litany of what ground the lady's gears. Her husband was probably cheating, her dog had explosive diarrhea all over the dry cleaning, her son was boffing someone on the football team, and here she was, locked out with an important society event, and wasn't I just taking forever to open a simple lock? I tell you, some days you just shouldn't wake up and go to work. Finally, the last pin tripped and I spun the lock open. She rushed past me into the house, so I went back to my truck and started writing up the invoice. 5 minutes ticked by, then 10, and I'm wondering what the silly woman is up to. I walked up to the door and knocked a few times, but heard nothing. Shrugging, I trotted back to my vehicle, ripped up the invoice, and started another. A total of 45 minutes later, I hear the garage door roll up, and I see that she is coming towards me dressed in what women in this area code call fashion. So, I hand her the adjusted invoice, and she screeches about paying me for the time I waited. What did I expect? Anyway, the rest of the day was on par with the start, so I was more than ready for dinner and time with my wife when my last call was over. I drove home and noticed her car was gone, but I figured she might be at the store or something. I went inside and kicked off my boots, grabbed a cold one, and grabbed some sample locks I had been planning on practicing on. I was almost done with an old Ruco when I heard my wife's car pulling into the driveway. I set it aside and grabbed the old towel I had to wipe my hands on, hoping that she had brought some takeout home because I was starving. I guess when I heard her laughing and what sounded like a male voice speaking in low tones, I should have realized that house-fried rice was unlikely tonight. She walked into the dining room with what looked like a college kid in tow. I assume some type of athlete because he was wearing a leather jacket. Probably football, I thought. He looked beefy enough to be a safety or linebacker. My wife gestured for him to sit down across from me, then took a seat next to him. I just looked at the two of them, kind of bemused, wondering what the hell was going on here. "Hi, honey," my wife said, seemingly full of cheer. When I didn't say anything, she continued, "This is Steve. He goes to A&M and plays football for them." Marcy introduced us. I still didn't say anything, but I got a cold feeling in my gut as I started piling up the locks and putting them in the towel for storage. Marcy has been my wife's best friend from high school, and she is an unmitigated cheating woman. I've pushed and pushed to split them up, but until about a year ago I had come up short. Long story short, Marcy was married briefly. But when her husband wouldn't go along with swapping and an open marriage, she took him to the cleaners and got a divorce. My wife and I had a horrible fight after that, which took us almost a year to get over because I told her that her friend was a useless, round-heeled, cheating woman. My wife finally agreed to stop talking to her and hanging out with her, although it seems now that was a lie. Well, dear, apparently you lied to me about not being friends with Marcy any longer, so now I have to wonder exactly what you are up to this fine evening. I guess that wasn't part of whatever planned dialogue she had put together because it took her a moment to recover. I went and grabbed another beer while she had a thing or two, spinning the cap off with my thumb and dropping back into my chair. I'm really sorry, Dave. I should have told you. But Marcy has been my friend forever, and it wasn't fair of you to try to force me to give her up. She puffed up a bit as she said the last part. I reckon she had time to get back on her script. In any case, that isn't what I brought Steve here tonight to talk about with you. You see, Marcy has explained to me how you are keeping me from being able to explore things that I haven't had a chance to do, and I think we need to discuss our relationship. I pondered this for a second, then looked her straight in the eyes. So I, your husband, am holding you back? Could you be a bit more specific? Marcy thinks, and I agree, that our relationship could become so much more special if you allow me to have lovers. She said that you would enjoy seeing a younger, stronger man take me in front of you, that it would make you more excited afterwards. I see. So Marcy, a cheating woman who took everything from her husband when he wouldn't agree to a similar plan, persuaded you that I would go for this idea willingly. She nodded happily, thinking that everything was right. Well, I'm sad to say that Marcy was wrong, my loving wife. I can only assume Steve here is supposed to be the one you are going to put the horns on me with, but I've got a spot of bad news. You see, I don't agree to this, and I'm afraid I am going to have to ask Steve to leave. I paused for a second. Now, you can stay or leave with him, as I don't really give a damn one way or the other. If you stay, though, we are going to have a nice long talk about whether or not we are getting a divorce or if you are going to give up your stupid friend. Steve apparently decided that since my wife appeared to be in complete shock, it was now his time to assert himself. Look, dude, I'm going to be with your wife tonight. Now you can either sit back and accept it, stay quiet, or I can break your damn arms and make you clean me up before I move from one place to another. I chuckled. Steve, let me tell you something. Now, I ain't some ex-Navy SEAL or Special Forces guy, but your idea of fighting is probably beating up on kids at school or in a bar. This isn't going to be that type of fight. Now, you can come around the table towards me, and the first thing I am going to do is take this towel that I've bundled all these nice locks into, and I am going to try to injure you. Like, seriously injure you. And if that doesn't work, I'm going for anything else I can get my hands on, such as those knives on the magnetic strip behind me in the kitchen. I smiled at the look on his face. There is always the possibility that you will still beat the hell out of me, but be perfectly clear on this one fact. I am going to keep getting up and coming at you with anything that can mess up your nice football career until you put me down and out. And Steve, putting someone down and all the way out is usually close to killing them. So you might beat me down and end up doing a stretch in prison, where your rugged good looks will make you plenty of friends in the showers. I set down my beer and laid my hand on the towel. So I guess what you have to ask yourself is my loving, sweet wife worth losing your career or freedom over? I guess in the end it wasn't, because he turned and walked towards the door, slamming it behind him. I got up and locked the deadbolt, shaking a bit from the adrenaline coursing through me from the possible fight. I turned around and went back into the dining room and sat down, looking at my wife. So, I guess this is when you decide if you are leaving with him or calling your friend and seeing if she will let you stay with her until the divorce is over. But Dave, I don't want a divorce. I love you. This was for us, she wailed. I reached over and patted her hand. Sorry, dearest, you don't get to make those decisions anymore. She was crying and choking back snot, so I reached over into her purse and got her phone. I looked through her contact list until I found Marcy's middle name. Apparently, this was supposed to fool me, but I knew her full name from when she had her husband served. He had come to our and commiserated over some beers, telling me to watch out for Marcy's influence on my wife. Apparently, I had messed that up. Go team me. I waited for Marcy to pick up, counting the rings. A silky voice came on the line. "So, how did Dave like watching Steve with you?" I snorted. "Sorry, the wife is a bit distressed at the moment. Steve decided that he preferred not having broken joints, so he left. I need you to come pick up your fellow cheating woman and take her home with you until we sort out our divorce." I clicked end on the phone and tossed it back into my wife's purse. As I walked into the kitchen to grab some garbage bags, I looked at my soon-to-be ex-wife, and then to the sky. I just knew this was going to be a bad day. 6 months later, I was finishing up another job in that same snobby neighborhood. Different house this time, but the same type of client, another trophy wife locked out of her McMansion. At least this one had the decency to be dressed and wasn't sharing her life story. As I packed up my tools, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. Here I was, still unlocking doors for a living, while my own life had finally locked into place. The divorce had been quick, all things considered. Marcy had convinced my ex to go for the jugular, but her lawyer hadn't counted on me having recordings of their little arrangement with Steve. Amazing what a phone can catch when it's recording in your shirt pocket. I'd moved into a smaller place closer to downtown, where the calls were more frequent and the tips were better. The apartment above my new shop wasn't much, but it was mine. No more listening to stories about society events or football players with wandering hands. The funny thing about locks is that they're pretty straightforward. Either they're secure or they're not. There's no gray area, no maybe when it comes to a deadbolt. Marriages, though, those are trickier. Sometimes you don't realize how loose the pins are until the whole thing falls apart in your hands. Last I heard, my ex was still living with Marcy, though not by choice anymore. Turns out most of her friends sided with me when the story got out. The wives in her social circle didn't take kindly to the idea that Marcy was introducing college athletes to their social set. Funny how fast someone can go from social butterfly to social pariah. I still get calls from that neighborhood sometimes. Word got around about what happened, and now I'm the locksmith they trust not to hit on the misses. Business has never been better. Life's funny that way. Sometimes you have to get locked out before you can find the right key. That college kid, Steve? He transferred to a different school after someone anonymously sent his coach our little recorded conversation. I might know something about that, might not. Either way, I heard he's riding the bench at some Division II school now, probably thinking twice about trying to be anyone's bull. These days, when I pack up my tools after a job, I don't dread going home anymore. My new place is quiet, sure, but it's honest. Just me, my locks, and a fridge full of cold ones. Some people might call that lonely, but I call it peaceful. After all, the best security system in the world can't protect you from the people you trust. I learned that the hard way. Still, every now and then, when I'm picking a particularly stubborn lock, I think about that day and smile. Sometimes the worst days of your life turn out to be the best things that could have happened to you. They're like those high-security locks. They might take a while to get through, but once you do, everything clicks into place. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. My name is Otto Klein. As the owner of several waste management companies, I am known as the Garbage King. I was married to Janet Carson. She was a lawyer and had kept her maiden name for her professional life. Evidently, her whole life is professional since she made no effort to present herself in social settings with anything other than her maiden name. My occupation in waste management was fine with her when I was paying for her expensive law school costs. She decided to go to law school after several years of working as a paralegal and realized she was as sharp as most of the lawyers she worked for. Even though I own several successful companies and make more money than most of the godlike barristers she worked with. Janet started looking down on me as second class soon after she got a job with a law firm. When the late nights, diminished intimacy, and increased disrespect spiked over several weeks, I suspected she had started an affair. Since gods don't mate with common folk, I assumed she was seeing one or more of her fellow lawyers. I quickly decided I needed to get proof that would withstand legal scrutiny. If I had just divorced her, she would have gotten half of my business and considerable wealth. If I could get proof of her infidelity with another of her lawyers, I could probably sue her agency. The law firm would probably pay quite a bit to avoid the embarrassment and possible loss of clients, therefore, I might make enough to compensate for what I would have to give her in divorce. My logic may have been faulty, but that's what it was at the time. That's what I based my actions on. Janet's office has an annual Christmas party. Every year Janet invites me and every year I decline, until this year. She was shocked and immediately tried to come up with reasons for me to stay home. There won't be anyone there for you to talk to, just a bunch of lawyers bragging about their billing hours. Do you really want to sit and hear that all night? I don't care as long as I'm with you, is what I said. As long as I can keep an eye on you and see if I can figure out who your lover is, was what I was thinking. Almost every day before the party, Janet would mention another excuse I could give if I wanted to back out. I didn't fall for it. I told her I was looking forward to going to the party. Even as she was getting ready the night of the gala event, she tried one last time. I hate to see you have a miserable time. Are you sure you want to go? Yes, dear. I knew her problem wasn't that my physical appearance was embarrassing to her. I have been told I am fairly handsome and in good shape, and my suit was Armani. I was no slob. I just worked with garbage. She didn't like it when I said that's what she does too. We got to the party with the second wave of people who were trying to be fashionably late. Most tables were already full, but we soon found one near the dance floor where only one other couple had settled so far. We took our seats and I offered to get drinks for Janet and myself. My first confrontation of the night occurred when I was standing in line to get our beverages. A man who appeared to be one of the lawyers with the firm said, "I don't believe I've met you before. Who are you here with?" I answered, "My wife, Janet Carson Klein." "Janet? I didn't think she was still married," he replied. "Yeah, we've been married happily for 8 years. Of course, we've been married for over 10 years. He looked stunned for a second, and then started laughing at what he assumed was a joke from me. That proved to me that truth is often funnier than fiction. On more than one occasion, I overheard the Garbage King label used in conjunction with my nearby presence. Their comment was usually followed by snarky laughter. I was not really that upset. I had assumed correctly in the previous years how I would be treated by these snobs. I was considered lower class, if not gutter-level scum. I watched as Janet mingled with various lawyers, paralegals, secretaries, and their spouses or dates for the evening. At the table, she spoke politely with the others seated with us during the meal. When the dancing started, I decided to give it a try. I asked my wife to dance. She looked like she could barely tolerate being seen with me. I didn't care. I tried to dominate the slow dances, but before long I was cut in on several times. Then she managed to accept several invitations from other lawyers for both fast and slow dances. I gave up and just sat back so I could watch her even more closely. It was about an hour after the dancing started that a middle-aged, distinguished-looking man came up to our table. He only looked at Janet. Unlike most others, he did not ask my permission. He was claiming her more than asking her to dance. Janet's face lit up when she saw him. She eagerly accepted and stood up without ever looking at me for my approval. I thought, we may have a winner. My focus was totally on them as observed them dance a slow dance. There was enough in her body language to feed my suspicion, but nothing overt enough to warrant a picture that would be damning. So was my hunch sufficient as proof of their being lovers? No. Luckily, I had another source of information, an unusual source of information. I had never told Janet that I had been recruited out of college by the CIA. It was found out that I had a highly accurate skill in reading lips. I had several successful covert missions and was being trained in lip reading, a Middle Eastern foreign language. My time in the CIA, however, did not last long, as one of those infamous whistleblowers blew my cover along with everyone else in my section. I was not interested in a desk job, so I left the company. I stood up and positioned myself so I could see what Janet was saying to her dance partner. I was not able to see his face from in front most of the time. This is what I saw. Janet: "Did you get the room for tonight?" Him: "Room 322. Did you put?" Janet: "Yes, I just put it in his drink a few minutes ago." Him: "It shouldn't take." Janet: "I can't believe you plan for us to make love in the same room my husband is sleeping in. That is so naughty and dangerous." Him: "You love the... Pretend you don't." Janet: "Are you sure he won't wake up too soon?" Him: "Don't. Plenty of. Are you still?" Janet: "Don't worry about me. If I promised you, you'll get it. Oh, Stanley, I am so ready." That was enough for me. I immediately spilled the rest of the doctored drink on myself and the table. I excused myself and took off toward the restrooms. I passed the restrooms and headed for the exit. I was hoping either I had not taken enough of the drug to be affected yet, or it was not that strong of dosage. I was wrong on both counts. Beeping monitors, bright lights, and alcohol smells were my greeting back to consciousness. It appears I had a car wreck when I fell asleep at the wheel driving home from the party. I looked around and saw a nurse. I was about to ask her a question when I saw Janet come into the room. I immediately sat up and yelled, "Get that bitch out of here." Janet ran out of the room. Once she left, I was still yelling, "She's the one who almost got me killed. I want to talk to a policeman now." The nurse tried to calm me down. The medical staff assumed I was having some kind of psychotic episode. I calmed down and told them, "I'll try to explain this in terms you can understand. I will sue you personally and the hospital in general if you do not get a policeman here in the next 15 minutes. I have been drugged. Do a tox screen for liquid Benadryl and other knockout drugs. I think my wife and her lover almost got me killed." I exaggerated what I knew of the situation, but it worked. Within 15 minutes, a police officer was taking my statement that I had overheard my wife and her lover talking about drugging me and taking my body off somewhere so they could be intimate. I didn't mention that I heard by lip reading. I figured drugging and attempted kidnapping ought to stir some action. I was told I needed to come to the police station after I left the hospital to swear out a complaint. I told them I would unless I got kidnapped or killed by them when I left the hospital. The officer didn't seem particularly concerned for my safety. While I waited to be discharged, a nurse came in to tell me the results of the toxicology report. I had been drugged big time. In fact, based on the amount of drugs I had in my system, if I had drunk the full glass, it would likely have killed me. The hospital staff had reported that to the police already. I heard the phrase attempted murder for the first time. Before long, there was a policeman stationed outside my door, and the second officer who interviewed me was more serious in her interest. I went to my house when I was discharged the next day. A police car passed my house on a regular basis, however. I was not in danger. Janet was not in our house, just all her stuff was. I found out that Janet had been arrested earlier at our house. She and her lover had come here in hopes of convincing me to not tell the law firm about their scheduled tryst in the hotel. That was the only crime they thought they had committed. She and Stanley were charged, however, with attempted murder. I imagine she collapsed when she heard the charge as the police put her in handcuffs. The two lawyers, as you might expect, refused to speak without another lawyer. The district attorney wanted to try the two separately. He thought if Janet saw she was going to be convicted, she would testify against Stanley Proust, her lover, and a junior partner with the firm. The DA was not successful. The two cases were intertwined, so they would be tried together. Janet tried to talk to me before the trial. She left messages regarding her innocence in trying to kill me. I guess she didn't think cheating on me mattered since she didn't bother apologizing for that. I ignored the rest of her messages. I quickly withdrew all funds out of our joint accounts and cut all the other financial umbilical cords she was attached to. Her father had to pay her lawyer until her lawyer eventually forced me to return her half. At their trial, the toxicology report of the drugs in my system was the chief evidence. There was a forensic chemist expert in poisonings, knockout drugs, and date rape drugs who told me the scientific name of the drug I was given and the danger I would have been in had I drunk the whole amount. I was the star witness. Lip-reading accuracy, particularly my lip-reading ability, was the main issue for the defense regarding my testimony. How could I possibly be so sure of what I saw? Most lip readers perform at just above 50% accuracy. I had several CI staff testify as to my proficiency being above the average. I even gave a demonstration to the court. The defense's attorney next tried to offer an alternative theory of what happened with the claim that I had actually drugged myself in order to accuse my wife and her lover of attempted murder. If convicted, I would be assured I would get all the assets in the divorce plus a nice settlement from a lawsuit against the law firm. In truth, I wish I had been capable of being that devious. The judge was not impressed by how I expressed in open court how stupid I considered the claim of the defense attorney. When the defense had their turn, neither Janet nor Stanley testified. They had another forensic chemist testify that the drug would likely not have killed me. They had a sign language expert testify as to the general inaccuracy of lip reading. I loved it when my lawyer asked him if some lip readers were more accurate than others. He said, "Of course." Then he was asked if he ever saw me to determine how accurate I was. He had to admit he hadn't. The only other witness was a police officer, Sergeant Haskins, who had interviewed the people who shared our table at the party. He testified that no one at the table had reported they had seen my wife put anything in my drink. The defense rested. The defense's conclusion. No one saw Stanley give Janet any powder. No one saw Janet put anything into my drink. There was no proof I had not done it myself. As soon as the police officer finished testifying, an older lady in the gallery kept trying to get the district attorney's attention. It was causing a disruption, so the district attorney sent an assistant to see what she was so upset about. The assistant hurried back and said, "Recess now." The DA asked for and got a 15-minute recess as the district attorney went back to talk to the lady. I happened to look over at Janet, and she seemed horrified at seeing the woman. She immediately started a strained conversation with her lawyer. The district attorney came back after recess and requested that a rebuttal witness be allowed to testify. He was asked whose testimony was being rebutted. Police Officer Haskins. Janet prodded her lawyer to speak. "Your Honor, I am requesting another recess in which time I will be presenting a change in plea by my client." Stanley and his lawyer went crazy. The word bitch was used several times. In the conference, Janet and her lawyer said she would agree to a guilty plea and a 3 to 5 year sentence in return for testifying against Stanley. The district attorney agreed. The old lady had told the district attorney that the police officer had asked her if she had seen Janet put knockout powder in my drink. He didn't ask if Janet put anything in my drink, so she said no to the knockout drug question. He did not ask her another question. The lady related that she had seen Janet put something in my drink. Janet had told her that it was medicine that would lessen the hangover that I supposedly always got from drinking too much. She said no to it being knockout drugs because she thought it was hangover medicine. It took several months more for Janet's guilty plea and sentence to be announced. Stanley got a new trial which featured Janet as chief witness. She described in detail if Stanley had pursued her and begun their affair. She swore she only wanted to deceive me, and that Stanley had determined the drug and the amount. Stanley countered that he had only done what Janet asked him to do, and that she had purposefully given me too much of the drug knowing the likely deadly consequences. Stanley's lawyer therefore proposed a new theory. Janet had seduced him and planned all along to frame Stanley and kill me. That way she would be rid of a husband who would leave a nice inheritance and get rid of a lover whose position as a junior partner would most likely go to her. My car crash messed up her plan. Stanley cried at the thought that he might be capable of harming another human being. The bottom line was that the jury believed Janet more than Stanley. He was convicted and sentenced to 10 to 15 years in prison. I was allowed to testify at his sentencing hearing. I said with tears in my eyes, "I should not be here today. I should be buried in a grave in Riverside Cemetery. Instead of sitting in that padded chair, my wife's lover should be standing beside my grave helping my wife celebrate their successful disposal of the garbage man. She should have inherited a lot of money. She should be out spending my money with her lover and fellow assassin. Don't be fooled. Neither one of them is upset I almost died. They are upset that I didn't die and got caught. It was my special talent in lip reading that saved my life. I had already drunk about 1/4 of the drink my wife doctored with drugs obtained from her lover when I learned it had been messed with. The amount I did consume was enough to cause me to pass out and crash my car into some bushes. If I had hit a nearby tree, I would probably be dead. Tests for the drugs in my system showed that if I had drunk the entire drink, I would have died as my wife and her lover fucked their brains out in the same room that I was dying in. My wife and her lover say that they only intended to drug me and humiliate me. They both say she mistakenly gave me what should have been a deadly dose of drugs. Even if that were to be true, do they just get to say oops and get a slap on the wrist? I don't think so, but I don't guess my opinion should matter. You see, I'm supposed to be dead. As I said, Stanley got 10 to 15 and Janet got 3 to 5. Janet shouted to me that she was sorry as they were taking her out of the courtroom after Stanley's sentence was announced. I responded, read my lips. I don't care. The divorce was easy with Janet in jail. She didn't contest anything anyway. I think she was actually ashamed of what she did and what almost happened to me. I wound up unintentionally getting what the defense lawyer said I intended to. All the assets from my marriage and, after considerable haggling with the law firm and Stanley, lawsuit settlements. I was already rich. I became richer. Since I am in waste management, you can say I am filthy rich. It was amazing to me how many women in the months after the trial wanted to audition for now vacant position of garbage queen. Not surprisingly, none of those interested were female lawyers. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. I sensed that something was bothering Paula almost as soon as she came through the door. It's something you pick up after almost 20 years of marriage. Is something wrong, Paula? I asked as I watched her fidget with the dinner preparations. No, nothing at all, she responded, perhaps too quickly. The other thing I had learned in my time with Paula was that she could not be pushed into revealing something until she so desired. To hassle her would be a waste of time, at best, or lead to an argument in the worst-case scenario. I set the table and kept my mouth shut. Tomorrow evening I have to go back in to work around 7 for a short while, Bill revealed Paula. I have to meet with some parents to go over the lack of progress their children are making. No problem, I replied as I recalled the conversation I had with Tim Brown earlier that same day. Tim was the head maintenance man at the high school where Paula taught. He had been in my body shop getting an estimate on repairing a ding in his fender from an all-too-common interaction with a deer. He had explained how ridiculous he thought it was to evacuate the entire school tomorrow evening, while some special hazmat guys removed about 4 inches of asbestos insulation found on a heating pipe in the bus garage. The garage was almost 100 yards from the school building, but the people in power were taking no chances that any problems would come from the removal. Hence, the decision was made to vacate the school, including the nighttime custodial staff. Now, Paula was telling me that she had an appointment at the school that evening. It made no sense. Paula never lied about anything, and especially anything this trivial. Then it occurred to me. It may not be trivial at all. Where was she really going and why? Why did she feel the need to lie? I mulled it over during dinner and well after. I finally came to a decision and turned my attention to enjoying my wife and our 2 teenage daughters the rest of the evening. The next day I asked my newest employee, Steve Milko, into my office and explained what I wanted him to do. Just follow Paula and see where she goes and who she meets, Steve. She hasn't met you yet, so she'll have no reason to suspect you. I know this isn't part of the job description, but it'll be doing me a favor and I'll pay you overtime for the time you actually spend doing this for me, I added. That's a deal clincher, boss, chuckled Steve. I won't have any trouble recognizing your wife from all the pictures you have of her and your kids here in the office. I'll follow her and give you a full report tomorrow morning. I didn't like what I was doing, but I felt I had little choice. Paula was lying to me. I had to know why. In all my years with her, I had never suspected her of not telling the truth. Now those years of trust were being eroded. "Well, boss, I did a pretty good job last night, but you won't like what I found out," began Steve as he sat down in the chair in front of my desk. "Your wife met some slick-looking dude at the Dewdrop Inn. They sat at a booth in the back, so we bought a couple of beers and sat in the next one." "Just who the hell is we, Steve?" I demanded. "I assumed that you understood that this was a sensitive matter and that I didn't want the whole town to know about it." "Shit, boss. How long have you been married? I can't just get up and walk out the door anytime I want without telling my wife where I'm going and what I'm doing. If I try to lie to her, she'll know it, and then my ass will be in a sling." Once Marcy heard what my orders were, there was no leaving her behind. It worked out good because she hears better than I do, and she's a hell of a lot smarter than I am, although I'll never admit it to her, confessed Steve. "Just get on with the story, Steve," I responded curtly. When I sat down, I noticed the guy had some old magazines on the table. "I couldn't tell what they were, but I know what was in them," continued Steve. "The prick was blackmailing your wife, boss. He told her he'd show the pictures in the magazine to you and your kids, and even send some to your wife's boss if she didn't cooperate." "How much money did he ask her for? What were the pictures? How much time did he give her?" I asked in rapid succession. "What did Paula tell him?" "Now, boss, remember that I'm just making my report here. Don't kill the messenger." "Okay," replied Steve. "He told her that he wanted her to be his mistress and gave her till Monday to make up her mind. Your wife begged him to accept money, but he just laughed at that suggestion. With all due respect, boss, he told her he wanted to sleep with her whenever the mood struck him. There were no options. I had to hold Marcy to keep her from going back and breaking a beer bottle over his coconut. She was hot. I considered what Steve had told me. Blackmail was easily thwarted. All it took was the truth. What truth could be so bad that Paula would even consider such a contemptible proposal? Who was this miserable bastard? "I don't suppose you caught the name of this guy?" I asked hopefully. "Boss, we did get his first name. It was Tom." "That was all your wife called him," replied Steve. "Well, shit, that rules out Dick and Harry. But there's a shitload of men named Tom in the area," I stated. "Can you tell me what he looked like?" A slow grin came to Steve's face when he heard my question. "I told you that Marcy was a lot smarter than me, boss. Before they broke up their little confab, Marcy had the bright idea of me standing up so she could take my picture with her cell phone. The only thing is she missed my handsome mug and took a picture of the asshole blackmailing your wife. I have it right here," grinned Steve as he pulled a phone from his pocket, punched a couple of buttons and held it in front of me. "Here's the dude." The light in the photo wasn't the best, but I recognized the man immediately. It was Thomas Mann, Educator of the Year in 2000, and newly appointed vice principal of the high school where Paula worked. He almost didn't get the post because Paula had complained about what she felt was inappropriate behavior between Mann and a freshman girl last year. He told Paula at the time, in private, that she would regret her actions. Apparently, he was trying to make good on his promise. The questions were many. What was he using to blackmail Paula? Why the old magazines? How would Paula respond to this threat? Would she come to me for help? Could she? Would she submit? I knew the answer to the last question. Over my dead body. It was Thursday morning. I had a few days to consider the situation and try to come up with a good solution. If it came down to it, I'd visit the prick Monday and end any dreams he had of sleeping with my wife or any other woman. It just seemed like a bad idea for me to risk being arrested. Then whatever he was using to blackmail Paula would become public knowledge. How does one thwart a blackmailer? That evening, Paula was quiet and preoccupied. Even our daughters noticed it and asked her if something was wrong. Paula offered some lame excuses about thinking of new ideas for a literature course she was teaching. Somehow, the girls accepted it. That night in bed, Paula was all over me. She gave me everything a man could ever ask from a wife and would have continued, if I had been able. Afterward, she put her head on my shoulder and proclaimed her unending love as she clung to me tightly. This thing had her concerned that she might lose me. I could see that much quite clearly. The next afternoon, just after I got home, there was a knock on the front door. My older daughter, Chris, answered it and called for me. It turned out to be a courier with a package for me, and one for my daughters, Chris and Lisa. By the time I had signed my name, Chris had her package open and was going through the contents. "These are old magazine pictures of naked women, and one of them is Mom," shrieked Chris. "Let me see," insisted Lisa as she grabbed the pages from her sister. "Wow, it is Mom, and she's showing everything. Look how young she is." "She was beautiful," gasped Chris as she looked over her sister's shoulder. "Dad, when did Mom have these taken? Why didn't she ever show them to us? Why did we get them in some generic package? Your mother will be home soon. You need to ask her those questions. Now let's sit down and calmly look this stuff over and discuss what we think about everything," I suggested. 20 minutes later, Paula came through the front door and sighed. It looked like she had the weight of the world on her shoulders. Then she noticed the three of us sitting on the couch with the pictures spread over the coffee table. "Oh no," was all she could manage as the realization of what we were looking at washed over her. Tears began streaking her cheeks. "Mom, come over here and look at these pictures we had delivered a little while ago," urged Chris. "You never told us about these, and we're all pretty upset about it." "I am so sorry, Chris. Those horrid pictures were a huge mistake that I made many years ago. You should never have seen them," cried a very distraught Paula. "Mom, you're so beautiful. We're upset that you never told us about them and never showed them to us. We want to make copies and put them on our wall. I can't wait to show my friends how hot my mom was," exclaimed Chris. "Yeah, Mom? Dad says that you are even more beautiful in real life than in these pictures. Why didn't you tell us about them, Mom? You are so cool," giggled Lisa as she ran to her mother and hugged her. Paula was obviously stunned for the second time in as many minutes. Her tears had slowed as her daughters showered her with love and compliments. She turned her attention to me. "Darling, you're still beautiful," I told her as I stood and walked to her. "In fact, you look even hotter today than you did all those years ago, and that's saying a lot." I took her in my arms and hugged her to me. She buried her face in my chest and sobbed for a short while, and then looked up at me. "You don't hate me, Bill," whispered Paula. "You still love me. More than ever, sweetheart." I laughed as I kissed her hard. "Now that we have all that mushy stuff out of the way, Mom, come over here and tell us all about these photos," insisted Chris. "We're dying to hear the story behind these pictures in these magazines. Were you a model or something?" "My father died when I was a freshman in college. Remember I told you about that, girls? I told you that I worked my way through my first 3 years of college because my mother wasn't left with very much money. Well, I posed for photographers that sent pictures into these magazines and for those calendars men like to look at. They weren't exactly respectable family magazines, but they weren't the really bad ones either," Paula quickly added. "Posing for these pictures and working weekends as a waitress was pretty much how I got through college. At the end of my junior year, an uncle I had never met died and left me over $10,000. I was able to quit posing for those pictures. I kept my job as a waitress and graduated the next year," concluded Paula. "Why didn't you ever tell us about that?" "Why didn't you show us the pictures, Mom?" asked Chris. "You look amazing. I hope I have a figure like yours in a couple of years." "I think that's obvious, Chris. I'm not proud of what I did. I feel like I betrayed you kids, as well as your father, even though I didn't know your dad at the time, and you two certainly hadn't yet been born," explained Paula. "I was determined to get a degree and a decent job no matter what it took. I compromised my future by being so determined to have one. I have been living in fear that your father would someday find out the truth and leave me. I wouldn't blame him if he did." "You don't seem to know very much about Dad," laughed Lisa. "He couldn't stop looking at these pictures and telling us how incredible you were and are. He said we should be very proud to have such a beautiful, smart mom." "He said that." "Did he?" marveled Paula. "All these years I have been worried about him finding out, and it turns out that it turns him on." "Mom," squealed both girls in unison. "We're just little girls, Mom," laughed Chris. "Save that stuff for the bedroom, please." "Sorry, girls." "Bill, will come with me and help me get this zipper down on my dress?" asked Paula as she took my hand and headed for the bedroom. "Don't forget about our dinner, you two lovebirds," called Chris, obviously not fooled by the zipper excuse. The next day was Saturday. I called Steve's wife, Marcy, and asked her if she would be willing to accompany me to a meeting with the school superintendent, Mrs. Gwen Wilder. When I explained what I had in mind, she jumped at the opportunity. Then I called Miss Wilder at her home and made an appointment for that afternoon, explaining that it was extremely important. The three of us were sitting around a large desk in the Wilder den. I pulled out a package and placed it on the desk. "I want you to see these pictures, and then listen to a little drama that Marcy overheard, Mrs. Wilder," I began. "As you go through these, you will see that they are old magazine photographs of my wife Paula. You will probably notice that she is posing in the nude. And that she has one hell of a figure," exclaimed Marcy as she leafed through the pile. "I'd really like to meet your wife. She is absolutely stunning. It seems odd that you would bring these to my attention, Bill. Paula has enjoyed a very good reputation in our school. Her work has been excellent, and she is tenured. Why even risk that by showing these risk pictures to me?" quizzed Gwen Wilder. "Because they exist, Mrs. Wilder. That means they may be used against her at some point in the future, and I fear it may be the near future," I added. "Paula helped pay for her college education by posing for these pictures. She isn't particularly proud of them. They are what they are. You can decide if these somehow violate her contract. She wants to keep working at your school, but she will not apologize, nor will she beg to keep her job. Moreover, she will not be blackmailed by some cowardly prick," I stated forcefully. Now Marcy will relate what she overheard and is prepared to testify to under oath. Monday morning came and Paula was obviously agitated. "That asshole is expecting my answer today, Bill. I told you about the deadline. I don't understand why he sent the pictures to you and the girls before the deadline," mused Paula. "Maybe he thinks my fear of being fired will be enough to cause me to acquiesce to his demands." "That's probably it, Paula," I agreed. "Still, he'd know that you would ask me who would send those pictures and I would tell you. That would seem to put him at some risk and decrease the likelihood that I would go along with his proposal," she reasoned. "Who knows what a demented bastard like that thinks, Paula?" I asked. "Don't try to understand a sick mind like that." "I suppose you're right, but it just seems odd to me," continued Paula. "I wonder if I'll still have a job after today. Well, there's only one way to find out. I love you, Bill. Thanks for being so understanding and forgiving." I held Paula tight to me for a long minute, gave her a kiss, and opened the door for her. Paula was working with several students on their lines for the school play that she directed every year. Classes were over for the day and the school was mostly empty. I stood in the wings of the stage, just observing. About 15 minutes into the rehearsal, Mr. Thomas Mann burst through a door raving and cursing like a crazy man. His ire was directed at Paula. "You miserable bitch. I've been fired because of you. I have a good mind to beat some goddamn respect into you. You're just a fucking whore," he screamed as he approached Paula with his fist clenched. Unfortunately for him, I was prepared for something like this and stepped in front of Paula before he could reach her. From the corner of my eye, I saw that the school kids were backpedaling in horror. That worked fine for my purposes. Man's surprise was total. I proceeded to stretch the crazy bastard out right on the floor. Then Mrs. Wilder rushed onto the stage with the school security and stopped abruptly, looking at Man's supine form and then at me. She simply nodded her head. Then she told her security man to call 911 and ask for police and an ambulance. After Man was wheeled out on a gurney, cursing like an old sailor, Paula drew me to the side. "Don't treat me like an idiot, Bill," she began. "Too many things don't add up in this mess. You seem to know what to expect before it happens, and nothing surprises you. You were here because you thought Tom might come looking for me. When he met me that night to show me the pictures in order to try to blackmail me, he only had 2 magazines with 4 pictures in total. He didn't know about the other pictures of me that were in circulation. You and the girls received every magazine and calendar I was ever in. Tom didn't have them all. I'm pretty certain of that. The super just told me that the testimony of some woman named Marcy Milko would be proof that Tom was trying to blackmail me for sex. The only Milko I ever even heard of is some guy that you recently hired, and that I never met. The only time that Tom and I met over this was at the Dewdrop. Now I remember a strange acting couple in the next booth that night. What are you keeping from me, Bill?" demanded Paula. I had been hoping Paula would never connect the dots. She was too smart to fool. I had no choice but to throw myself at her mercy. "Paula, you aren't the only one who has lived with a secret for all these years. Please listen and try to understand. I was just out of trade school and working my first job. As was the practice back then, the guys always pinned up pictures of women on the walls in the shop. They put them in their toolboxes and almost everything else they could fit them on. You were one of those pinups. I couldn't stop looking at you. I started buying all those different educational periodicals, looking for more pictures of you and reading whatever I could about you. In one of them, I discovered you were a student at a big state school in the East. Sad as it sounds, I started driving down to Penn State on weekends, hoping that was the state school and that I'd see you in person. There was no real reason to even think that was the school you were in, or even if you really went to college, I admitted. I had these ideas that I'd find you and that you'd be naked in my arms within an hour. Incredibly, I did find you after a football game. Remember? It was your senior year and you had stopped modeling or whatever you call it. You also remember that it took me 2 years to get you naked in my arms. I was head over heels in love with you long before that. I knew the school was closed the night you said you had to go back in, but actually met with Man. I had my new guy at work follow you, and luckily he took his wife, Marcy. They heard everything and told me. I had those pictures sent to the girls and me so you could end your fear and tell Man to go to hell. Those pictures were from my private stash. I took Marcy to the super's house Saturday and told her the whole story. I knew if Man tried to show her those pictures, it would be the final proof that he was a blackmailing shit and she would terminate him. I worried that he might try to take it out on you, so I hung close to keep an eye on you, I explained. Why didn't you ever tell me that you knew about those pictures when we met? Or at least at some point over the years, Bill asked Paula. I was afraid you would think I was a creep or a stalker, and I guess technically I was. Once I found you, and found out that as great as your body was, your personality and brains were even better, and I couldn't risk losing you. I've been afraid that someday you'd find out that I had spent 8 months looking for you at Penn State and think I was a weirdo, I confessed. I just love you so much, Paula. Didn't you take an awful chance showing those pictures to the girls, Bill? Did you realize that you could have made them hate me? Questioned Paula. No, that never crossed my mind. I made certain I was there when they looked at them. I knew they would never hate you. I also believed they would study my reaction to the photos and use that as their guide. Your girls could never hate you, and it's beyond my ability, or anyone else's, to make that happen. Their reaction was what you saw. They have a hot mother and I have a cool wife. I'm going to enjoy listening to you tell the girls the rest of the story tonight, Bill, stated Paula matter-of-factly. They know my secret, and now you'll tell them yours, so you won't live in fear any longer. They'll know that if I hadn't posed for those photos, we never would have met. I just hope you don't creep them out. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
I'm 27 years old, and my fiancé, whom I'll call L, is 26. My father, who I'll refer to as B, is 52, and my mother, R, is 50. L and I first crossed paths during her freshman year of college, both living in the same dorm building. Coincidentally, we discovered that we lived just 2 towns apart, so I often gave her a ride home during breaks. The extra 20 minutes on the road meant nothing compared to the time we spent together. Our friendship gradually turned into a romantic relationship, and since we both had close-knit families, we introduced each other to our loved ones early on. While I had met her family during those rides home, it was mostly just pleasantries and introductions at the time. Nevertheless, both our families warmly embraced our relationship, and it continued to flourish. I was a year ahead of Elle academically, so after I graduated, I returned home and secured a promising job with an attractive salary. Despite the geographical distance, our bond remained strong, and I frequently visited her at college. Once Elle completed her studies, she moved in with me since our respective jobs were located in the city near our hometowns. Like me, she received an excellent job offer with a generous pay package at her current company. After cohabiting for 3 years, I decided to propose and we eagerly embarked on planning our wedding. Now, let's get to the part you're all here for. In hindsight, there were several red flags that I overlooked, attributing them to my father's desire to welcome Elle into our family. For instance, he frequently called her, and if I was around, they would claim to be discussing upcoming family events or similar topics. I recall one incident when Elle was in the shower and her phone rang. Seeing that it was my father calling, I answered. When he realized it was me, he sounded both surprised and upset. I inquired about the reason for his call, and he mentioned wanting to discuss my mother's upcoming birthday, which was just a week away. Even now, typing this out, I can't help but feel foolish for not seeing through it sooner. On the fateful day when my world turned upside down, everything appeared routine. Elle had Thursdays off, and she prepared breakfast for us as usual. After I left for work, she sent me messages throughout the day, discussing everyday matters like dinner plans and household chores. I realized that I had forgotten some important paperwork needed for a 3 p.m. meeting and decided to head home for lunch to retrieve it. Unbeknownst to her, I didn't inform her of my impromptu return home. Upon arriving home, I noticed a car in our parking lot that resembled my father's. Still, I thought nothing of it, parked my car, and entered our building. As I opened the door to our apartment, I walked right into a scene straight out of a cliched movie. A scenario where a person comes home unexpectedly and catches their partner in the act of infidelity. I stood there in utter shock, a whirlwind of emotions raging within me. Rage, sorrow, disgust. If you were a fly on the wall, you would have seen me frozen in place, unable to move. It felt like an eternity before I regained my composure. Eventually, I took out my phone and began recording. I gathered all the scattered clothes strewn across the floor and hurled them into the hallway outside our apartment. With the camera rolling, I filmed my approach to the bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and I continued recording for about a minute before switching on the lights. They both jumped at the sudden illumination and turned their shocked gazes toward me. To my absolute astonishment, it was my father lying in bed with Elle. After the initial shock, my father noticed I was recording and began to panic, desperately searching for something to cover himself while pleading with me to stop recording. He eventually found a towel and wrapped it around his waist as he approached me. In response, I warned him that he continued toward me, he might get hurt. He either didn't care or didn't hear me and reached for my phone. That's when I decided to act. I landed a solid punch square on his jaw, causing his head to bounce off the door before he crumpled to the floor. Elle shrieked in shock. I aimed the camera at her and said, "Concerned about your lover, but nothing to say to your fiancé." My father eventually regained consciousness, and I informed them that I had merely come to retrieve something for work and that I would be returning soon. I made it clear that if either of them was still present when I returned, I would share the video with everyone they knew. I ended the recording and addressed my father, telling him that he was dead to me and no longer my father. However, I suggested he go home and speak to my mother because I intended to have a conversation with her soon. I sat in my car for some time, lost in my thoughts, until one of my bosses from work called to inquire about my whereabouts. I assured her that I was on my way back and tried to hide my disheveled state. When I reached her office to deliver the paperwork, she noticed something was amiss and asked what was wrong. I initially brushed it off, claiming it was nothing and that I'd be fine. However, she scrutinized me and noticed some blood on my collar. She rushed to my side, visibly concerned, and pointed out the bleeding. I explained that it was my father's blood and proceeded to show her the video. She watched the footage in its entirety her initial confusion giving way to the realization that my fiancé had cheated on me, with my father no less. She asked if there was anything she could do, suggesting that I take some time off. However, I declined, stating that I couldn't return to work at that moment. Instead, I mentioned having another shirt in my office and assured her that I'd be fine for the meeting. During the meeting, I put on a facade, concealing the turmoil that raged within me. I smiled and engaged with my colleagues as if nothing had happened. After the meeting, my boss approached me, still bewildered by how I managed to maintain composure. I offered no clear answers, simply stating that I didn't know, and retreated to my office. Now, I find myself alone at home for the first time in a long while. I'm at a loss for what to do next. I know I need to leave this apartment. I simply can't live here any longer. Additionally, there's the matter of getting myself checked for STDs, and I suspect I may have injured my hand during the altercation. Update. So, the day after my initial post, I tried calling my mother, but none of my calls went through. I thought about meeting her for lunch to tell her everything, even though it was going to be painful. After numerous failed attempts to reach her, I decided to drive to her house. She needed to know what had happened, no matter how difficult it was going to be. Driving there, I couldn't help but panic about how I would break the news to her. I had to pull over twice to throw up. It's not every day you have to tell your mom that her husband is involved with your fiancé. When I arrived and parked in her driveway, I took a moment to gather my thoughts and calm down. I was still in my car when my mother stormed out of the front door. I got out of my car, and she began yelling at me, accusing me of coming to her home after hitting my father during an argument with LAS. He hurled insults at me, called me an abuser, and demanded that I leave since Elle wasn't ready to forgive me, and she hoped Elle never would. Apparently, my father had taken Elle to our family home and told my mom that Elle and I had a fight, and when he tried to intervene, I had hit him. My mother continued berating me until I finally snapped and said, "Really, Mom? Because your husband is involved with my fiancé. That's why I hit him." If you can't take my word for it, I have a video. I'll send it to you, but don't expect to see me again. I don't want to hear your apology when you finally realize you're just as terrible a mother as my piece of shit father. Her face dropped, and she looked as shocked as I must have looked when I first walked into my apartment and caught them. I took out my phone and sent her the video. My mom turned on her phone, opened the video, and watched it up to the point where I turned on the light. She then put her phone down, looked up at me, and I turned and went to my car. As I backed out of her driveway, I saw her in tears. My heart ached for her, but too much had been said during that argument for me to turn back and forgive her. Back at home, I started packing up everything related to Elle and my family. I boxed up all of Elle's belongings and placed them by the front door. Legally, this has been her residence, so I can't technically kick her out. Her name isn't on the lease, but she avoids conflict, and she comes back. It's likely to cause a lot of problems. Anything associated with my parents, I boxed up and stored away. Despite our close family ties, I've never had a problem cutting toxic people out of my life. I texted Elle's parents to call off the engagement and informed them about her cheating. I thanked them for their kindness and support. Our relationship was still developing, but they had been good to me, and this just added to the hurt. I also asked if they could pick up all of Elle's belongings. I haven't received a response from them yet, but I hope they'll come and take her things so that Elle doesn't have a reason to return here. Update number 2. After my last post, I decided to take action. I needed to get tested, find a therapist, move to a new place, and buy a new bed. I called my doctor's office and asked for tests and a therapist referral. I had my first therapy appointment 2 weeks ago, and we decided to continue once a week. I also got tested last week, but I won't have the results for another week or so. Please cross your fingers for me. I got in touch with a friend who's a real estate agent, and he sent me a bunch of listings. I ended up choosing a refurbished cabin on the outskirts of my city, and I finished moving 2 days ago. Once I was settled in my new place, I called Elle's parents. I told them I'd moved out, and Elle still hadn't picked up her things. I warned them that the landlord would start showing the apartment soon, and had better collect her stuff before it got thrown out. It seems like that lit a fire under them, because the next day, my former landlord thanked me for clearing out the apartment. Nobody knows where I live now, except for the friend who helped me find this place, so I'm confident that neither Elle nor my parents will drop by. The only downside is that I traded a 10-minute walk to work for a 45-minute drive. My phone has been blowing up with texts and calls from Elle, my parents, and some friends. Honestly, I have no interest in talking to anyone except my therapist. At work, I've been keeping to myself. I go in, get my work done, and leave. Occasionally, I have to put on a fake smile and pretend everything is okay when I talk to someone. My boss from my previous post has been checking in on me more, but I don't tell her much either. I just say thanks and that I'll be okay. The truth is, I don't know if I'll be okay. I understand that time heals, but it feels different when you're dealing with multiple losses all at once. A significant part of me feels like it's gone, and there's no way to bring it back. My therapy sessions seem to be going well, although I've never done therapy before, so I don't have much to compare it to. My therapist and I get along fine, and she seems genuinely interested in helping. During the first session, we introduced ourselves and briefly discussed why I was there. The second session went deeper, and we talked about my relationship with my parents. I told her it used to be great until all of this happened. We communicated well, and I grew up in a good home, but all of that means nothing now. She asked why I cut my mother out of my life, and I explained that she said things to me that I wouldn't even say to someone I despised. There's no way to come back from that. At the end of our last session, I gave her the link to my posts here so she could read more about how I feel and what's going on in my head. It's just easier for me to type things out than to speak them. So, if you're reading this, hi Doc. For now, I'm still miserable. I thought I'd be okay by now, not necessarily happy, but at least okay. I know some of it is my fault for not communicating with my friends, but thinking about responding to them just feels exhausting. I know they'll want to get together or come to my new place, but I don't have the energy for it. Until I do, I'll focus on work, attend my appointments, and sit on my back deck, sipping on some cheap whiskey while trying to enjoy the beautiful view. I used to hunt in high school, so maybe I'll take that up again now that I can hunt from my back porch. Final update. In my previous post, I mentioned getting tested for STDs and trying to restart my life. I'm relieved to share that I'm clean. I've settled into my new place, and I must admit my description of it being a refurbished cabin was a bit generous. It was actually refurbished about 25 to 30 years ago and is a bit dated. However, with all the free time on my hands, I decided to give it a real makeover. The only things I didn't do myself were the electrical and plumbing work because I had no clue how to do them, and I didn't want to get electrocuted or deal with sewage pipes. Doing all this renovation work has been incredibly therapeutic and helped clear my head. I'm still seeing my therapist once a week, and to those who suggested it, you probably saved my life. Venting, releasing my frustrations, and receiving guidance have been more beneficial than anything else in my life, past or present. I'm still working at the same company, and I've become more open with some of my coworkers, especially those I'm closer to, as well as my boss from my previous post, all thanks to the advice from my therapist. Also, with her guidance and some of your suggestions, I've reached out to my friends and have been slowly reintegrating into the group. Now, let me give you an update on what's been happening with my family and my ex. I felt ready to have a conversation with my mother, so a little over a month ago, I unblocked her on my phone and reached out. I called her, and she answered almost instantly, sounding panicked. After reassuring her that it was me, I suggested that we meet and talk. She agreed, and a day later, we met at a diner near her house. She was already there when I arrived, and upon seeing me, she began quietly sobbing. We talked for about an hour in total, and before I left, she told me something important. She said that Elle is pregnant. Apparently, Elle showed up at my family's house and told my mom. She didn't know if the baby was mine or my father's, and Elle had been asking if I had been in touch so she could let me know. My mom hadn't informed her, so Elle left without speaking to me. Well, that's the update. I have a lot on my mind, and I'm not sure what to do or how to feel. Thank you for taking the time to read this, and I apologize for rambling on.